If you're new to Fusion 360 or a seasoned user, organizing your design should never take a backseat to production. Often, when you start a new design, you tend to want to just jump right in and begin creating. Well, that's all well and good if you're just making one part. But if you begin to make an assembly in Fusion 360, you really need to think about the organization of that assembly. I'm Stephen Shane, aka the 3D Professor, and this is the first episode of 2-Minute Tips. Assembly organization in Fusion 360. This tip is about organizing your Fusion 360 assembly files to make it easier to work with. Creating assemblies in Fusion 360 is done using a hierarchy of components. At the top, you have the assembly file itself. Then within the assembly, you can create components. And within the components are bodies, sketches, construction objects, etc. A quick note before I go any further. Name everything that makes sense. That includes components, bodies, construction objects, sketches, etc. You can even name elements on the timeline, but that's another tip. This dust collector assembly is a flat assembly, meaning all the components are attached to the top level in the hierarchy. This can be a little better organized by putting the hose adapter as a subcomponent of the intake housing. That can be done in the browser panel by simply dragging and dropping the hose adapter on top of the intake housing. Notice that the icon for the intake housing changes to show that it is now an assembly and no longer an individual component. While this can be a good way to work with components, the bodies for the intake housing are at the same level as the hose adapter component. I'm going to undo that change and do this a different way. Keep in mind that every time you add a component or drag and drop a hierarchy, it adds to the timeline. I'm going to create a new component called Intake Assembly. I'll right-click on the top level assembly and select New Component. In the New Component dialog, I'll enter the name Intake Assembly and click OK. Then I'll go ahead and drag the intake housing over the intake assembly and the hose adapter over the intake assembly. This now creates a subassembly that contains the two components, with each component being at the same level in the hierarchy. Use this process to keep your assemblies clean and well organized. This makes it easier for you if you have to go back at a later time and make edits, and for other people who are going to open the assembly file and work with it. Well, that's the first 2-minute tips from the 3D Professor. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Keep coming back for more 2-minute tips.